talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
with global pals. It's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about
everything theater, truly so, and perhaps never more so than this episode. And we'll explain. Hi, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs.
It's great to be back with everybody. And, you know, a lot of the programs, the podcasts we've done deal with in front of the, standing on stage.
Yeah, a lot of actors.
Right, but, as anyone knows in the theater, that's only a part of the magic. So much of the magic happens around you, the set, to create the environment and really set the stage. And Ellen, you've been on sets where you go, oh, please, dear God, and others you go, oh, I can't believe I'm here, right?
Absolutely. I've been on ones that I was scared about breaking an ankle on, and I've been on ones that got a standing ovation when they were revealed.
Right. Oh, I think about, Wicked, when, they draw the curtain and, the house goes wild.
Yeah.
We're really fortunate to have with us tonight folks who create that magic. And I don't know if everybody realizes a premiere studio is right here in Argyle, New York. And we've got with us our guest today, our Thomas Lloyd. He is the founding principal for Adirondack Studios, and also Allison Hubbard, who's the business development administrator. Good to see both of you.
Nice to be seen. Thank you for having us.
For having us, very much so.
Of course, old reporter here, I have to do a little background work. And Tom, you come from an opera background.
Yeah, I'm an opera brat at heart. I started my life in Tanglewood and moved on to Central City, Colorado, and then ultimately to the Lake George Opera Festival, where my father was the general director in the early 60s, right here in Diamond Point, New York, in a little Quonset hut. And then he moved the company down to Queensbury High School in 64. And he tried to figure out what to do with me. And so for $25 a week, I probably shouldn't say that, they put me in the basement of Queensbury High School, where I built scenery for the opera festival, and therefore started a long tradition.
So now I can say bravo for many years ago I saw Man of La Mancha. There, and it was I remember everything about it being fabulous, and you think, wow, I'm watching this in a high school.
Yeah. We tried to do our best to convert it into something that was a little more aesthetically pleasing. And the bad news is that it was, in fact, a high school auditorium. But the good news was it was 30 seconds off of exit 21 on the Northway. And it had plenty of parking. And we got to use the gymnasium so that we could close the half of the gymnasium off and set an entire setup in one half and another set in another half and rehearse on both on the sets and then transfer them back over to the stage. It had a chorus room and a band room and a kitchen, cafeteria. I mean, we had and plenty of rehearsal space. So in reality, it really was a pretty good place to perform opera.
How do you go from the basement of Lake George High School for $25, right, to now owning a premier design company?
I'll try to be brief about that. By the time I got to college a few years later, they said I was a theater major. I was going to become an actor, which was a bad idea in the end. But they said, okay, well, you have to do a certain amount of hours every week, because you're a freshman and that's just what we require. What can you do? I said, well, I can build opera scenery. So they sent me to the opera workshop at Northwestern University. And there was a guy there, one guy, formerly Marine Corps sergeant, And for some reason, we hit it off, and we built all of the scenery for the opera season at Northwestern University. Following which, he did finish his graduate studies and went back to New York and started a scene shop in the East Village. And I got through a couple of years at Northwestern and said, this is ridiculous. It's too expensive, and I don't think I'm going to be a very good actor anyway. Maybe I'll go back to New York City and do something more useful with my life. And I could go to Hunter College for free. So that was where I went. And I worked for Al Johnson in the basement of Hunter College and became the technical director for the Manhattan School of Music, and hooked up with Chris Detmer, who was the guy, formerly Marine Corps Sergeant, that I met at Northwestern, who had started a shop. Well, I had still been working every summer at Lake George, right? So I had worked myself up to be the production manager. And I said, Chris, why don't you come up for the summer? It's really beautiful up here. And so Chris came up, and so did some of the other folks that worked for Chris down in New York. And everybody kind of fell in love with the Adirondacks. You know, what's not to fall in love with? I mean, we just couldn't resist it. So every summer people would come back here, and in the wintertime we'd go down to New York and do our thing, freelancers basically. Chris had his shop, and in 74, I think it was, he said, hey, why don't you join the shop? And I said, why don't we do something better than that? Why don't we see if we can move the shop up to the Adirondacks? And we didn't really think about what a daunting challenge that was going to be. We said, yeah, let's go to the Adirondacks and start a scene shop where everybody will want to come and build scenery, because we're only 200 miles away from the major metropolitan area of New York. But we did. So in 75, we rented a couple of U-Haul trucks, dragged all our tools up, found a building on Route 28 in Warrensburg, right on the Hudson River, and opened a little 5,000 square foot shop, which was huge to us at that point. Now, 47 and a half years later, we're in 125,000 square foot space in Argyle, formerly medical manufacturing facility that was originally started by the inventor of the catheter, David Sheridan, in the barn. It's on our property across the way. And the buildings that we are in were the Sheridan Medical Manufacturing Company, subsequently Mallinckrodt Medical Manufacturing, subsequently Tyco, who was a huge conglomerate who bought it all and shipped all the jobs off to Guatemala or someplace that they could get people for 30 cents an hour to build catheters. And when they went to auction the building in Argyle, nobody showed up because it was in Argyle, New York. So my partner, Chris, who knew the maintenance guy there, said, let's take a look at that building, because who knows, it might just be a place that we could build scenery. And we went out, we looked at it, and we said, okay, we'll put in the entry-level bid for the property. And there was 100 acres, including the original barn that Mr. Sheridan had invented the catheter in. And they accepted the offer. So just about 9/11, after having moved about the area in various different locations for many years, we moved to Argyle and into the building that we're currently in and probably will stay in. So there we are. That's about the logistics of it. The company itself is a whole other story, and how we have evolved from an off-Broadway prop shop, which we were in New York City, to a full union shop in Warrensburg and in upstate New York, struggling to attract customers to our area, because they said, well, we don't want you to bring any cheap scenery into New York City to just because you're a union shop. And we went, okay, so we'll go out and we'll go regional. We already know how to build opera scenery, so let's go out and find opera companies that need sets, because we have all this wonderful 5,000 square feet of space now, and we can build opera scenery, and we did. And
Tom,
so,
let me jump in for a sec. What's the difference? I think a set is a set is a set. What makes something an opera set versus a set to do Neil Simon on?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's all building scenery is all about storytelling at the visual level. So, we want to create an environment on stage or anywhere. Could be in a public art environment, could be in a museum, could be at an amusement park, or for opera, ballet, theater, you name it, for rock and roll. I mean, in the end, what we're trying to do is convey a visual message that complements everything else that is going on at the facility, whether it's wherever it happens to be. So there's not a whole lot of difference. I guess the big difference in opera is that we think of it as being grandiose in a lot of ways. So bigger is better in terms of opera. But, Lake George Opera was a tiny little space and currently still is. So it doesn't have to be that large.
Can you walk us through the process of, a theater company either contacts you or you get in touch with them, you decide that you're going to work together. What's then the creative process from that point forward, working with the designer and then actually constructing and coming up with the final piece?
That's been a big transition over the years, because when we first started, the designers were really our clients. In order for us to be able to acquire work from whoever it was, we had to have the designer say, "Oh, we want to work with Adirondack." It might have been that we had good craftspeople, wonderful scenic artists, or and we did. We had really quality people. And the way you connect to a designer, especially one that's 4 hours away, is by showing them the quality of the work that you can do. Because the biggest problem we had originally was nobody wanted to travel all the way to the Adirondacks to look at their scenery when they could go across town in a cab and get back for lunch, right? So it was a big, it was a big selling issue for a long time. But when we started working for opera companies, their designers were generally more international. So when we brought them to the Adirondacks, they kind of went, "Oh, isn't this marvelous, right? You have this wonderful place here in the middle of nowhere, in the forest and the mountains and the trees, and it's so beautiful." And we would show them a good time. And so the designers became, to some degree, secondary, and the relationships that we were building with our clientele became more critical to the whole process. But the idea is it's all collaborative. So the other thing is that as time progressed, we decided that pleasing the designers was important, but that having our own design capabilities was probably more important in the end. And now we have an international design team that is designing international projects. So,
and things, I'm sure, have changed immensely from pen and ink to computers in the 40 some odd years, 47 years since you started.
Computers?
Computer generated work?
Yeah. Well, there's the digital aspects of our work are certainly significant. There's nothing quite like a hand-painted backdrop or a mural, depending upon whether you put it up on a wall or whether you hang it on a stage. And we always would prefer to have our artists hand paint. Occasionally, however, digital artwork wins. I mean, let's put it this way. If you have an image of 1,000 people in a crowd and you can see all their faces, it's a lot cheaper to print that than it is to paint every single face. And I remember we did some work for the Baseball Hall of Fame, little theater space that they have, and it was all hand painted murals of crowds in the bleachers, and it took us forever to do because every face is a different story, right? Whereas you could, and that was before digital printing of drops and murals was really fashionable, but it has become so now. And now there's a hybrid where we'll do a digital print and then do scenic paint over the top of it to give it a little more depth and texture.
And you guys have really branched out, and there's not an area that you haven't, your work doesn't touch. So Allison, I wonder, your business development, how do you go finding something, some corner of this world that needs their magic that hasn't already been touched?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's challenging for sure. We do have a growing client base that has become repeat clients that come back to us time and again. And we also have quite a few people reaching out to us, cold calls, just saying, hey, I've got this thing, I've got this idea, can you help me? And a lot of times that will turn into a education to the client to say, yes, let us take you through the process because we're so experienced. We can tell you how to go through the process of designing and then, fabricating it to your budget and making sure that we can execute on your schedule. So we found that we do quite a bit of qualifying internally for the clients that we want to work with. And a lot of it's word of mouth. We've got a reputation now in the themed industry where people want to work with us. And it's really fun to see big names come through for clients that we haven't yet worked with, but we want to. It's really pretty exciting.
Is your first love still the stage, or has that morphed into something else?
The tradition of the company is purely theatrical, and we try to apply the same principles of the show must go on. Everything has to be absolutely perfect when you get to opening night and the curtain opens. There can be no mistakes, and you're only as good as your last performance, right? Or job, as the case may be. And so, yes, those principles apply to everything that we do, from building casinos to public art to concert halls to just about everything that we do. It's the same principles that are that are guiding us.
Now, I've noticed that a lot of theaters have moved towards projection to help create the imagery of the show. Is
Sure.
that something that you find that you're working with clients, or do you stick more to the actual tangible material builds?
If you're going to project scenery, you have to project on something, right? So we're still doing the something that is being projected on. More and more large scale productions are now doing something that we call projection mapping, which means that there are objects that may be not as finely painted, or dimensional shapes that move or can be rearranged on a stage or in a viewing environment, and that projectors then broadcast images or imagery onto those various shapes, creating a magical sort of moving landscape or any type of environment that you can put into a projector. The difficulty there is if you balance how much it costs to build a set versus how much it costs to create the projected art and acquire the equipment to project that, it's kind of a toss-up, right? So yeah, and in the projection case, it can be more expensive just because of the level of technology involved, whereas traditional theater scenery is still, people with hammers and nails and saws, and although we do quite a bit of work with robotics and plasma cutters and automated systems these days.
Talking money, Allison, how did you guys manage through the pandemic?
Oof, it was rough. I think one of the things that is most fun about working for Adirondack Studios is that collaborative nature. We all kind of bounce off of each other's energy, and ideas happen, brainstorming happens so much better when you're in person. So while we had to work remotely for a period of time during the pandemic, it was, it was a little isolating. Not to mention the fact that our production people who are making the scenery had to be there. We stayed open. We were considered an essential business because we were producing scenery for grocery stores. So that was kind of a way for us to figure out how to stay open and keep our people employed through the pandemic. But all of us office staff that had the ability to work from home did. I don't want to go back to those times. I hope we can continue working in person.
Grocery stores? Scenic design? Hello?
Have you ever been to a Wegmans?
Oh yeah.
It's the
Have
best.
you been to the Market 32 in Colony?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All of that stuff was created at Adirondack. Yeah, Wegmans came to us in '96, and we've done over 100 of their stores, and they continue to contract to do maybe 4 or 5 new stores a year. And it's basically the decor that you experience. And again, it's theater in a grocery store setting, right? I believe the concept is that because you're in an attractive environment that sort of echoes a quaint European village atmosphere, you're inclined to buy more groceries.
I think it's all about the guest experience, whether
it is.
Whether it's
certainly for Wegmans, it is, yes.
Right. Whether it's in an audience or whether it's a consumer that's going to buy groceries, if you give them an experience that's enjoyable where they do want to go back, all the more reason, right? They're gonna be shopping in that store more often. So I think it doesn't really matter where the work is, what kind of work that we look at and what we take on, as long as it gives us the opportunity to tell a story and give the guests an experience that they'll never forget. That's our goal. That's our aim.
Because that's what I love about this kind of work, because I think we take it for granted, right? We go somewhere and we don't think about, wow, that was designed to make me feel that way or give me that emotion. I'm thinking of amusement parks. I took my daughter to Legoland not too long ago, and I think you guys worked on Legoland, or at least one of them.
We did several attractions. This is the one in Goshen, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful walking through. If you just take a moment and take it all in, it's amazing work.
And it's art.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. It's art on a grand scale.
Mm-hmm. It is. And that, I think, the art is kind of the reason that we enjoy our work as much, because it's really all, even doing repeat supermarkets for Wegmans is still, it's the art of it, and it's the magic that's created when we finish those environments that keeps us excited, right? And we have grown to where we now have an office and a shop in Orlando, an office in Shanghai, an office in Singapore, an office and a shop in Dubai, all of which are very busy, and a design studio in Pasadena. So there's about 250 of us on a global scale, and we're working, in amusement parks, museums, live entertainment, special events, public art, and commercial real property development like casinos and restaurants and resorts, and now the latest trend seems to be pop-up interactive experiences, right? So we're doing quite a bit of work with a company called Meow Wolf, which you may have heard of. If you haven't, you should check them out. We just opened their Denver facility, and we're working on 2 more projects with Meow Wolf that are coming up. And our old standbys, Disney and Universal, are keeping us quite active. And we're just putting the finishing touches on the brand new Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure you've sat in a theater on opening night when it was the set that you folks crafted. Do you have that moment? And if you haven't, can you share with us the moment and the show where the curtain goes up and you see the finished product in that setting with a full audience?
It's really magical when you know that it came from the people that are working here in Argyle to see the results of that. I think the last time I really had, it's nice to go and see Pandora at Disney World and Star Wars and the things that we've done that are on that grand a scale. But I remember when we did a production of Goya for the Washington National Opera, and it was a brainchild of Placido Domingo, who was the general director at that time, who came to the shop to visit, and see the work that we were doing. And it was big production on the main stage at the Kennedy Center, and I got to go down and see it, and I was just blown away when, you know, I mean, the curtain would open on each of the 4 acts, and the audience would applaud. And it wasn't just because it was Placido; it was the fact that it was that grand. So,
in the
yeah, it's really
collaboration,
fun.
in the collaboration working with designers, are obviously there's are very talented designers throughout the industry, but are there little tips and tricks or advice that you find yourself kind of working with them, that you feel you bring to the table when it comes to figuring out how to construct something or what to make it out of?
Sure. It's almost, well, after you've been doing it for quite as long as we have, you get to recognize the level of, I don't know, the capacity level of the designer the first time you look at their drawings, and you say, well, I wonder why they chose that as a way of presenting their design when they could have done any number of other things that would probably have been just as practical or maybe better from a technical standpoint. And so then it's about building a relationship or an element of trust. We just did the Metropolitan Opera's production of Malcolm X, which we shipped off to Detroit. And it was a designer that we had not worked with. And so we said, you got to come up and spend a few days playing around with us and let us figure out how to make this thing work for you, because they only want to spend so much money. We had a budget. The Metropolitan is very strict, and we've never been able to work for them in the past, but they were able to work out a union arrangement whereby some of their work could be outsourced, and they came to us. And so we worked with Clint, who was the designer, and his assistant. And after 3 or 4 days and several work sessions and sampling on the floor with the artists and different techniques, we arrived at an approach that everybody was very happy with, and it fit the budget. So again, it's about developing that level of trust with the designer so that they know that the people that are working with are people that are respecting their vision for it. It's a little different in the public art domain, because there the artist is everything. We have to more or less pretend that we are the artist, right? That because everything that we do is really an extension of their, you know, their visual magic that they might have created in miniature, but we're doing it in large scale, you know? So it's even more challenging in that regard.
Tom, I wondered, you know, way back when in college days in scenic design class, the design had to also have a metaphor. It's not just the pretty pictures, but what you created had to have a meaning, if you will.
Sure.
Can you share some of that thinking with us? Is that still going on, particularly for stage? I see Allison's nodding. I think sometimes people don't realize that there's more than just putting up the walls.
Sure. The whole thing is about storytelling, right? And as Allison said before, it's the guest experience. We want to be the physical environment of the guest experience. If you're in a dark ride, a roller coaster in a black box, and we're doing all of the scenic elements or the animatronic characters or the lighting or the murals or the special effects, it's all timed, it's all integrated, and it's all visual storytelling that complements what is being provided by media, in many cases 3D media, where you're wearing sometimes artificial intelligence or some other, you know, newfangled way of presenting the imagery that you want to tell the story. But somewhere in the background are all of the things that are the physical assets that contribute to that story. So that's where our focus is. And a lot of times we find ourselves saying, well, so why is the thing that you can't see because you designed it and the only way anybody would ever notice it is if they turned around in the middle of a roller coaster ride and said, "Oh, look at that!" Right? So we go, that's not important. Here's what's important. This is what you want to look at. This is what's going to advance the story. And that goes all the way back to, the basic introduction to theater class that I took, I think, as a freshman at Northwestern University, right? Gotta find that focus.
And for our budding designers out there listening to this podcast who might still be in school designing for their high schools, what would you say to them?
Good luck. I mean, it's a,
it's
a very small world. Innovation is critical, but good design principles and focus, understanding of perspective, styles, history, and willingness to experiment and take a challenge and just go for what you believe in. I think that separates the real talent from the people who are, certainly the world is full of designers, but the ones that are really great are the ones that take those chances.
I think one of the things that's so cool about our company is that there are so many talented local artists that, I bet some of them don't even really know that we exist, but they're interested in being creative and going into the creative arts. And we are a resource for them. We're always looking for good young talent in the area. And we provide jobs to people that live in this rural, remote area, and it's an opportunity for them. I know before I started working here, I was sucked into the retail world, and my profession was something that I couldn't escape. And I always knew I wanted to get to something more creative. And when I stumbled upon Adirondack Studios, it was almost like a part of my brain reactivated to be able to be creative again. And the fact that this job exists here in our area in Argyle, it's a great opportunity for people who are in this industry that are interested in working. I just love that we're that resource for people.
I love it.
It's also interesting that a lot of the young talent that comes through goes on, and we're happy to see them, go on. The best ones always come back. It seems that, but we love to send them out there into the world, because the experiences that they've had working with us are the foundation for the kind of practical knowledge that they need out there in the real world.
How many are employed up in Argyle?
In Argyle, about 175, I think, right about now.
It fluctuates quite a bit depending on what we're working on.
But if someone's designing and they're local and they hear this, even if they're not local and they hear this.
The designers, there's about 8 creative designers in Argyle. Currently, there's about 6 creative designers in Pasadena. There's 1 in Orlando, and then we have about 8 or 10 technical designers. And the difference being the creative designers are mostly working in blue sky concept stuff, pretty pictures and inspiration, whereas the technical designers are all working in AutoCAD and trying to grind out the details of how this is going to be built so it can be handed off to somebody on the shop floor and it can be built in whatever time frame that we thought it was supposed to be built in. There's another whole pile of young technical designers over in our Dubai shop. Most of them are Filipino because for some reason everybody in the Philippines gets an engineering degree, and we love the fact that we can take them, with that kind of a background and knowledge and plunk them into the world of entertainment and see how it absolutely enthralls them to be able to work on something that is completely unlike, a shopping mall or a hotel or a restaurant or a highway development or something like that.
Are you still doing any design work?
I'm sorry?
Are you personally still doing any design work?
I never did any design work. My whole my whole thing in life was to find people that were much better than everything that I could do and surround myself with them, and then sort of hopefully kind of keep them focused and on track. And that's worked for me.
Once you got out of the basement. But this has been fascinating. I think that people don't realize in general how broad scenic design is. I mean, you go everything from Make-A-Wish to Universal to Mohegan Sun, and just about anything you can think of in between.
Anywhere there's a story to be told visually, you know, and you know, we try to make sure that it's enjoyable work, right? I think that's part of the whole thing, is we really want to have fun with it, even though it can be exasperating and challenging and frustrating. In the end, if it's enjoyable, creative, stimulating work, and it's always something that nobody's ever seen before, right? We always want to do something that nobody's ever seen before. Then it fits our bill.
And that's the last word, because it sums it up so perfectly. Allison Hubbard, Tom Lloyd, Adirondack Scenery, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening. Please check them out. We'll post the link to all their work so you can see all the amazing things they have done. And we'll catch you next time. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything.